Mark Burrick. I am going to take you through an hour of development, knowledge, and picking the brain of a fantastic coach, somebody who is four, maybe five-time coach of the year. She's had an indoor tenure. She transitioned from indoor and is now one of the most successful coaches in beach volleyball. She is currently ranked third all time in NCAA wins with her university. And this is the head coach of Stetson University, Kristina Hernandez. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Doing some research on you just to get named Coach of the Year once is a cool, great honor. You've done it 5 times, is that right?
4 times. 4 times.
Four times.
Should have been 5. It's okay. We'll do 4.
You got robbed. I understand.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. We all do at some point. Yeah, it's 4. Yeah, the first one was cool. I'm trying to remember. It might have been in 15. I think it was in 15. And I had coached indoor for such a long time. And, I had won a title with Hofstra when I was there, but I still never got Coach of the Year or anything like that. It always seems like such a far reach, far thing.
And do you even pay attention to it as a coach? You're
yeah,
so focused on yourself winning, like your teams and your girls
right.
and your personality. So it's, what other people think of me, like we got our own family, right?
Right. Yeah. So it's one of those things, like when it happens, like, oh, that's awesome. That was cool. And now it's fun. Now it's fun, anytime our team is doing really well and they're getting, their accolades for the conference. And that, and that pops up towards the end, I take it more as a compliment from my peers in our conference that they respect what it is that we're doing, and what we've done. And that we can kind of keep doing it every year or doing it a little bit better. So now it's awesome. And, it's always a good feeling to kind of just be recognized by our conference because we vote and we all do that. And you know how that can go sometimes. You never really know. But so, yeah, I'm appreciative of how it goes with our conference. But, yeah, it's nice to have it on the resume there at the beginning. It's not a bad thing to have. So I try to enjoy it as it comes. But, I think we enjoy when our kids get recognized and honored probably more.
Yeah, I'm kind of predicting that, like you have your family every day. You're focused on how do I help this kid get better? How do I help this kid get through like schoolwork and practices? And you see the work that they put in that sometimes we forget our own work and what we're doing behind the scenes. And you don't do it for recognition.
Mm-hmm.
You do it because you have a desire to help and probably a desire to succeed.
Yeah.
Well, when you're voting for that, because all the coaches in the conference vote, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. What do you take into account when you're voting? Is it how they act on court? Is it just the success of their team? Is it how much their team has changed that year? What do you, when you're voting for that and you're trying to think like, whose name am I going to put on this list? Or is it just your buddy in the conference that you like to hang out with in between matches?
Yeah, I think we're all pretty, we've all been in the same conference for a while, so I think we're all pretty close. But like for instance, like I think Florida Gulf Coast in our conference had a lot of transformation this year. I thought that they really grew and got better and really were competitive within the conference, outside of the conference. So that was an easy one because, I felt like Chris deserved it, because they kind of went from, they just elevated their program so much within that kind of that snapshot. And they had a lot of new players and younger players and kind of a mix of old and new. So, it was nice to see that, but I think it's always trying to look for that is like who has really, like you said, transformed from one year to the next and maybe not done it with, a loaded senior class. And like I said, he kind of had a sprinkle of really young kids. And so we know that they're going to continue to get better and be really good next year as well. So I think all that's exciting. It's, how you can kind of keep reinventing your team from year in and year out, and how you're constantly changing and how much better you get. And also he kind of does it solo. So I have a ton of respect for Chris, a lot. He does it by himself, and that's hard enough. I complain about my one assistant only having one. I'm sure we all do, but it's like he's running around, these big matches and top 20 matches, and he's coaching 3 courts at the same time. And that's hard in itself. Yeah. So I can't even imagine from a game prep to film prepping. I mean, we do a lot of hours by, just me and my, we have a volunteer, so we're very fortunate, but it's a lot of work for one person. So I respect what they were able to do this year in the conference.
Nice. It's always fun thinking, like, what do coaches expect the most? And to me, I don't know, when you said, it's not a senior loaded class. If I were to look at a senior loaded class that would be like the most successful, to me, I would say that coach now deserves every accolade, because when they came in, they weren't that good. That group of 4, I always kind of look at the way our country is run, and I say, like, you give one guy 4 years to make massive change, and we barely give like college football coaches 4 years.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like 3 or 4. Okay, if you couldn't do it in 4 or 5, then you're out. But to do it for a country is just wild.
Yeah.
And I forgot where I was going with this, but yeah, and seeing like, does a younger successful team speak to the success of the coach or the quality of the coaching, or does it speak to the recruiting? And is that just an asset that the coach has, that you're like, you know what, he deserves coach of the year because he was a great recruiter?
Yeah, it's tricky, especially with COVID and all these, we've got all these 5th years now, and that's about to be cycled out here within, I think, 1 more year or so. But, you had a lot of teams that had 6, 7, 5th year seniors this year and the year before. And they're a little stacked and they're overloaded. So it's like, it's like we expect them to win. It's a tricky thing. Like you take Grand Canyon, who got, National Coach of the Year, Kristina. She had, I think, a couple of transfers, nothing massive. And, she lost a couple that transferred in herself, but, they had a great season, and they kind of were mixed with having some upperclassmen and some new freshmen and some sophomores. So, they made a name for themselves and kind of made a dent. So I don't know. I think it's just, for me, it's always more of the surprise, like who really did something that was just a little bit unexpected, because I think sometimes we always expect the same teams to do well. We always expect, and I think the way the game is growing, that's going to happen less and less. I mean, you look at Georgia State with all the upsets they had in the championship, and that's fun. Like, that's why basketball is so entertaining, because, it's the talent level is becoming, more even, and everybody's a really good coach, and everybody that's there knows what they're doing. And, now you're just trying to see who can, kind of keep their nerves there at the end and finish those matches. So I feel like when the sport first started, it was just like, yep, that's, it's USC and UCLA were like on an island over here with Pep kind of by themselves, and they were just untouchable. And I remember
they had everybody, and the whole crop of coaches. Like, currently there's, what is it, 80%, maybe 70% of the NCAA coaches are like current or former AVP players.
Yeah.
It's like this whole crop has just been pro, and the girls that they're training are going to be able to wipe the floor with them because of just like the coaching they've had. All those players, they barely had coaches. All of us, people our age, like the coaches who are leading right now, it probably took us a while to find a beach volleyball coach, if we even did.
Yeah.
So now the next generation of coaches is going to be having trained as a player since they were 10, every single day, and the evolution that's going to come in 10 years, it's going to be sick, I think.
No, I know. Yeah. We're watching club practices right now, and there's, 10 and 12-year-olds over here practicing. I'm like, wasn't even thinking about that when we were 10. It's like, what? And they're training with like Patty Dodd, and it's like, okay, I'm sure by the time you get in the next couple of years, you're going to be pretty good. So it's fun, and I think the sports is going to keep kind of growing and evolving. But I think constantly seeing new teams kind of pop up and be surprising is awesome, because it just means that we're all getting better and that our sport's going to get better. There's better teams. The better, at the end of the day, the more competition we all have with each other, the better it is for our sport in general.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
In terms of so I've got a few questions that just came to mind. I got to keep them in the back of my head. But in terms of the game changing, is there anything or any rules or any formats that you would like to see different? I mean, I know there's constant, and for the last 30, 40 years, there's been discussion of the hand setting rules. That's something to come to mind. You don't have to touch on hand setting.
Yeah.
But is there anything that in this next evolution, with so many more players and the game growing for the women in our country, is there anything that you would like to see changed or at least experimented with?
They're always talking about different ways to kind of set up these lineups. Todd is always talking about like doing rider style, where it's like, hey, here's my pair. Who do you want to put up against them, instead of having your typical like 1 through 5, and this is who we're going to have in the 1 seed, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So let's just unwrap that just before we go on. For somebody who has never seen or witnessed a college duel, which I think is a sweet name for it, how does a college match, a college duel work when 2 teams show up, or 3 or 4 teams show up to one beach? What happens?
So we play with 5 pairs. So your 1 through 5 seeds, you've got your 6, which is your exhibition pair, but they don't count. So fairly similar to tennis, your 1 seed is going to kind of be your highest. There should be your highest level team. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you've got to win three of those 5 matches to be able to win the duel. So a lot of
matches happen at the same time in one day, or like scattered.
Yeah, a lot of them are staggered. We've done both, and obviously the national championship, all 5 teams play at the same time. And then other places, you can go in 2 rounds where your 4, 5, 6 may play first, and then your 1, 2, 3. So kind of different ways to do that, but. I think there's a lot of discussion if that's the best way to kind of match up. And I think it's more because I think the level, like I said, the levels change so much, where like our 1 and 2 seed could probably interchange a lot, and sometimes our 3. I think there's a lot of mixing, and I do think there's some 1 seeds where it's like, yeah, they should, that is definitely where they should be. But I think once you kind of get down there's a little bit more balance. I do think 5s, they're not your lower level team, but they are your, considered your 5th seed within that lineup. They tend to be a little bit younger, maybe a little bit smaller. But
are you supposed to game it? Is this like a?
No.
Is this a coach by coach situation where some people like, well, yeah, you win the duel, so I got to game it. Like I will put my 1 seed as the 3 seed instead, to make sure that I take the bottom 3 matches.
So there's a lot of rules and structure within how to make your lineup. You're supposed to do it by ability first, so you have to create your lineup by ability. But then there becomes gray area, because you can move your seeds up either 1 up or 1 down, like within a day or within a weekend, except for conference championships, NCAA championships. You also can insert an alternate anywhere. So if somebody wasn't in the original lineup when you had your first game of the season, so let's say, we're playing FGCU, and we start with 1 through 5, and then we've got 5 kids that are alternates off that weren't in the lineup. I could take one of those alternates and insert them anywhere in the lineup. I could insert them at a 1, I could insert them at 2. So that gives you flexibility with it. So there's, again, it's supposed to be done from an ethical standpoint, where you should have, again, by ability, but you still have all these ways where you can kind of, when you're an FSU and a TCU, and your kids that are not playing are just as good as the kids that are in the lineup, your alternates are really key for you, because they're just as good. Where I think when you don't have as many players as that, your alternates are not going to benefit you. There's so many tricky ways. So there's more talk about is how we line everything up really the best way to do it, or is if we walk into a weekend and again we're going to play FGCU, I'm like, hey, here's who we're going to put for our 1 seed, and then they base it off of that who they want to kind of match up with that team, and you keep going down all the way through. Is that the best way? I don't know. There's like, floaty things around it, but it's not really kind of taken on more life beyond, a few kind of outrageous ideas. So I think for now, that's probably the structure it'll stay at.
Okay, so you're not allowed to game, and does that become somebody from the outside's judgment? Like, is it complaint based between the coach, like, hey,
sandbagging a
come
little
on,
bit,
and you get the dirty look, and then you look at a ref or a judge?
Yeah, so the refs unfortunately don't get involved with it. We can protest it, but you still have to play the match. So we play it. I think people have gotten better about it. I think before, when some of the rules first came out, people would still do it. They would do it anyways because King just got slapped on the wrist, and nothing would really happen. So it was kind of like, what's the consequence of me doing this anyways? And now, you can put in like a formal challenge with the NCAA committee, and then they look at those when it comes time to like figure out bids and who's going to go and, all that stuff. So I think that has helped kind of regulate it a little bit. But, when you have the ability to kind of move your lineup with everything, and I think, again, the more balanced teams are, it's really hard to like decipher, is that player really supposed to be there or not? So I think the more players that have the teams that have larger rosters, that becomes kind of hard to like justify because they have a lot of talent. So, who am I to say that that's not supposed to be at their seat? Because there's so many things you don't know. You don't know how that kid practices. You don't know if she's really lazy. You don't know all those things. You're kind of just judging like, oh, she should be there. It's like, well, you don't know the whole background of it. I mean, she may hate watching film. She might be really difficult to coach. I mean, there's so many other things that go into play there. So, but I think there used to be back in the day some moves where it was like, come on, that's just really like, you shouldn't move your 1 seed to the 4. Or like all of a sudden your 1 seed's at the exhibition and your exhibition's now playing at the 1 seed. So
like she's limping. She was limping all week, and now
why weren't they in the lineup in the first place of their exhibition? So I think this year was fairly good, besides a few instances that we kind of hear chirped about all the time. But I think for the most part, everybody's trying to be as ethical as possible when kind of making their lineups now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you, is there a way that let's put it this way? What factors play the most important role for you when you're trying to decide who plays together? Do you allow your team to just go wild, wild west and say pair up? Or are you, like making people play with them, and then is it their individual ability? Are there certain players like, Karch who can just, or I guess now Phil Dowhauser, who can just win with anybody? Is it relationship? Is it their individual ability? Or is it the chemistry between individuals and trying to pick up on that? How do you look at that?
It's all those things, because I think it's different for every pair. I mean, I'll take my 2 seed, for instance. There are 2 defenders, and we randomly threw them together one day because a bunch of our blockers were out for the day for practice. So we just threw them because they're too good to play with kind of some of our lower level players. So we're just like, we'll just throw you guys together. And it was instant. Like we instantly saw the chemistry from them. It was just beautiful watching them play together. Just like, it's not difficult to figure out. And you're like, okay, we have to put them together.
When you say chemistry, do you mean like their connection, talking and cheering for each other, or did like the nature of the set and the hit, were they matching each other's timing and flow?
Yeah, it was just the flow. The flow of the game was so easy, and they had, never practiced together really because again, they were just two defenders.
Mm.
They were neither really blockers, but they were so good at peeling and lining up and taking responsibility. That's what I mean. Like we just threw them together, they started playing, and all of these things just clicked for them without a lot of effort. So that, and they became our 2 seed, and they're really competitive. I mean, they were 22-9. I might be off with that, but they were huge for us and clinched a lot of duels for us. And they're 5'7" and 5'8". They had 2 seed, but impeccable ball control and defense, and just really 2 smart athletes. But so that was easy. They were one of the first pairs that we put together, and it was just a random one-off day where we just couldn't do anything else.
And that shouldn't be undervalued, right? Because like I
No.
see so many like defenders where I've played really well with guys my size and probably better just because the flow of their set
Mhm.
or where they needed to be, that's where I wanted to put that ball, and they like without words understood the
Right.
positioning and how to create timing for me, and I the same for them. Whereas you keep trying to find this big blocker, and there's such a that's a smaller field that you're
Right.
looking for, and it just a lot of times it doesn't match up just because I hate their hand sets, I hate their bumps, whatever. Like yes, it's a set,
Yeah.
but there's a feeling where it's like that's the one that I want to hit, and you know how to put it there every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I think we have one pair like that every year where it's just like, and Annette was our primary blocker, and she's maybe 5'6" on a good day. But she sets herself up well to funnel to Carol,
Okay.
who's the other player, and she just peels so much, and she's so good at it that I was like, all right, well, I guess we're never going to get a block here at the 2 seed, but it's all right. And she didn't. I don't think she might have gotten one block the entire season. But again, and they're both hand setters. So again, their ability to just kind of move and flow offensively and do a lot of fun stuff. So, but yeah, I think that we have a pair like that every year. They're just, and we love those pairs because they're not easy, but they're the ones who are like, oh, okay, that's the good one. And then everybody else, we kind of let, we'll either kind of decide who our kind of top 4 are, and we'll try and pair them together and see if it works. A lot of it is chemistry. We always tell them it's not necessarily just the good stuff. It's how are they in conflict and can get through their bad days and their bad moments, because that lets us know they're going to be good. Because a lot of times when things don't automatically work, I think some of the younger players, their automatic reaction is like, well, I need a new partner. It's like, well, that's not realistic.
All the younger players in all of the ABP.
Yeah, it's like everywhere. Oh, yeah, I don't like this. What's my solution? I'm just gonna get a new player, a new partner. It's like, yeah, that's not real.
Welcome to the AVP. It's miserable. I think I wish more of the pros stuck together. The whole the rest of the world is like, I don't understand how you guys play literally with a different partner every single tournament, or like every 2 or 3 tournaments. So like, how do you even improve? And now I see that, I understand it. But there's also like a huge field, and everybody's on that little bubble, and there's just too much ego, honestly.
Yeah, a lot of it is ego, and I would say the same for ours. It's like you think you should be playing with this person, where it's like just focus on the one that you're with. So yeah, a lot of it is their ability to deal with conflict, the flow of the game, how they communicate. At some point, we'll ask them for their input. Like if you had to choose your top 2, who is it and why? And we'll listen to it. Doesn't mean we are necessarily going to do it, but we at least get their feedback. Our 3, 4, 5 this year, they were all freshmen and sophomores. And I think we initially started with what we thought was good, and on paper it made sense from a skill level and where they should be playing at and what seed they were playing at. But they weren't able to win together. Like they would get to these tiebreakers and be 13-13, and all of a sudden they would just like choke up and hit the ball out. And I'm like, why are you doing this all of a sudden? And that happened to us a lot at the beginning of the season. There there were so many 2-3 matches that we lost when we had like the advantage, because you could just tell they really didn't have a lot of confidence in each other as a pair, and that caused hesitation. So that wasn't good. And then, random stuff always happens, and we're at a tournament in South Carolina, and my really good 2C player gets injured, and she's just got to be out for the day. So we have to shift like the entire lineup.
Yeah.
We end up, changing all of our defenders at the 3, 4, 5 and kind of sliding up or moving down. And those pairs just clicked instantly, and all of a sudden they're winning tiebreakers now, and they're doing it very aggressively. And we're like, okay. And then you ask them, it's like, oh, I just feel really good playing with her on the court. Whether it was a change of scenery, who really knows? But that change was really huge for us, because by the time we went into ASUN, we had made those switches at the 4 and the 5 from just the defenders. Like, we switched our defenders down there.
And ASUN's your conference, right?
ASUN's your conference. Those two pairs went 25 and 3.
Whoa.
Together from ASUN to the national championship. All those so they were just,
dang.
Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily, it was the same, 4 kids. We just switched their partners, and they just, again, it was just either having confidence in each other, or all of a sudden, it was crazy. But they were just completely new players, being able to close out these really tough matches and doing it so aggressively. And it was awesome to kind of see that.
Now, how do you try specifically? I'm gonna lock you down and try to make you give some details, but how do you try to figure that out before those matches? What's the process of, we're practicing, we're getting better, and at the same time I'm trying to figure out who is going to work together? Because you said it happened like at a tournament, because somebody drops out and you're like, oh, what a surprise. But I'm sure that there's an active every day, like, maybe this person should be here.
Yeah. It's a long process. We will start it in the fall. And granted, we always have 1 or 2 kids come in January, so we'll start the whole thing over, but we at least have some basis of fall. I love numbers. I love stats. I love information. I like making decisions like that. And just instead of me just guessing on who I think should be playing together, I like information. It's just how my brain works. So, we have Huddle, just like most of us do, kind of in the top 10, 15.
Can you describe what Huddle is?
It's a video platform software, but they break up all of our games. They'll break up our scrimmages, our practices, and they'll pump out stats now for us. And hitting charts. So we're about our 3rd year into it now. And I think we really understand the baselines. Like, if you're going to play at a 1 to 2 seed, these are usually the numbers and the percentages that you have to hit. If you're kind of at this, these are the numbers and percentages that you have to hit.
Do you know them offhand? Like, what's the hitting percentage for a top 1 or 2 team in general?
They're like 600 and higher. I mean, they're maybe making 2 to 3 errors a set. And the highest level, like UCLA, USC, I mean, those are, they're playing at that level. Their passing percentage is at a 2.0. Their serving percentage is at a 2. They're at, the serve receive side out is 60% and higher. And so we know all those numbers now. So we know, if over time consistently these are your numbers, realistically this is kind of the level that you can play out. So we start with that. You gotta
be at minimum against the top teams, and against everybody, you gotta be citing 6, getting kills 6 out of 10 times with no errors, or 7 out of 10 with 1 error.
Right.
And
crazy.
For the people who are like, I do that, you also have to look across the net and understand what your competition is.
Right. Yeah. Not so easy. Yeah.
But if you're hitting under 500, that's your first baseline. Every 10 times you get the ball, do you side out 5 with no errors? You should at least be at 50% if you want to just up your level.
Yeah.
Good metric to pay attention to. We're doing that in our online courses. We're getting everybody
Yeah, it's
to
great.
stat
It's great
themselves for the first
information
time.
because I think when you look at that either from a weekly basis off of a scrimmage and practice or after you played from the weekend, and then you can compare it to what you did the week before and the week after, that's what I think we kind of know, like, okay, they're progressing, they can do this consistently, they can play at this level consistently. But those numbers are important. I think it gives them real information to kind of latch onto for markers to hit. And that's such a indoor thing, because indoor always had stats. You have stats for everything. So
And 5
I
coaches.
like that piece because it lets us know, if we have a team that's making 6-7 errors in a set, realistically, we're like, yeah, you're either going to be a 5, maybe, or maybe you just can't be in the lineup, because that's a lot. It's a lot to have in one set.
Are there some people that make more errors when they play with a different person? Like, does
sure.
the same athlete not make errors no matter who they play with?
Yes. There are ones you always like you said about Phil. Like, there are players that we have that can win with anybody on the team. Whoever they're with, they're just winning.
Okay.
And our freshman 1 seed blocker was like that. She just regardless of who we put her with, she was winning. She was hitting the same numbers. Her energy was the same. Her communication was the same. So you're like, that's just a really good player. So now
why was what was about her that she could play with anything, or any athletes that you see that can play with anyone?
Yeah.
Is
I
it
think
feet to ball? Is it that technical? Is it emotional? Do they make their partners feel good, or are they just neutral? Do you see in the conference any similar qualities behind those people?
I think that I think you hit, they make people better. I think they find how to win with whoever they're with, and
I know that's tough.
I know. I think sometimes when we think we get paired with somebody that we shouldn't be playing with, we automatically kind of change a little bit. Some kids do, where, they kind of have not a bad attitude, but maybe a bad perspective, where they're only seeing bad things happening or complaining about, like, oh, well, the set's not exactly
ready to
where
give in quicker, right?
Yeah, so you're nitpicking at everything instead of, like I said, just kind of being neutral and understanding, like, okay, this is my partner, this is the circumstance, and this is how I'm going to be able to win. And we always talk about trying to manage the weaknesses with whoever your pair is, like, not trying to all of a sudden be really like an expert at it, but how can you manage it to where it's not going to affect the game? Because everybody we're playing is going to do something a little bit different, and you're not all of a sudden going to hyperspeed learn how to kind of adapt to it if you're not prepared for it. But maybe your partner is having a horrible day, and you still have to figure out how to win instead of just making that as an excuse of, like, well, it's because she wasn't playing well. Because there's always one, and I'm sure all of us are the same. We always have one player that is the same, that regardless, they can just, I think it's a lot of internal motivation, but I think they just know how to win, and they're focused on that part of it, that, like, okay, this is who I have, so let me figure out how to win, instead of.
You think that the players that can play with anybody and do it successfully, do they change their game according to who they play with? Or
no, I don't think so.
No, interesting.
No. They might,
so they're not like chameleons in terms of playing style.
Yeah. They might take on more responsibility, but it's not like they all of a sudden start optioning because that person can't side out, or, whatever it is. But I think that's the thing. I think their game doesn't morph. I think that they play the same style of game with whoever they're with, where another player, again, might have not a great reaction to the partnership, and that because they're in that emotional state already, they then change their game unknowingly, because they're not in that flow of that state of mind of just playing. They've got this kind of handicap that they see, where they think they have to do more to win, but they really don't. I mean, they do, but they don't. But I think that perception is huge, where we've got the players that are like, yeah, I'll play with whoever, wherever you need me. And we know we can plug them. And then there's some where it's like, they really can only play with that person because they just don't do well with anybody else. And that's tough. And we always tell our players, like, the more people you can play with, the better. It only opens up your availability. So we go through all of that in the fall, and we mix them up, and we have them play pairs tournaments and duels. And so we always
you track all their wins and losses with their
and as pairs, because we want to be in a position to where when we do have injuries, because honestly, it happened to us probably 2 or 3 times this year where somebody that was a significant player got injured and we had to shift the lineup. We don't want them to panic. I don't want to panic. I want to have already looked at all of the options that we have and know that, like, okay, if we plug this in here, we're still going to be as competitive. So we do that in the fall to make sure, like, okay, so-and-so can play. This is her best option. This is option B if we have to. And then we have them play together a lot so that when we do have to make those changes, they're prepared for it. It's not a shock to them. And we did that a lot this year. And I think our team did really good in handling that this year because we had prepped them to be able to play with at least 3 different people should the scenario happen.
Good.
And I think the teams, you take FSU, they're probably a perfect example because she's using her lineup really strategically.
That's Brooke,
really
right?
well. Brooke, yeah.
Yep.
And they've got a lot of really good talent, that's not playing, but they change their players and pairs a lot kind of at the lower seeds. And it's really hard to scout because you never know who you're playing. Like, you're like, I thought she was going to do this and she didn't do it. So we have to prep them for that. But I think she uses that to her advantage because her team is used to doing that a lot. And I think it's kind of just an MO that just, we never know. We always walk into FSU being like, okay, this is a lineup we scouted, but we very well know this is probably not the lineup we're going to play. Because she can match up because she has so many players off. So that's a different kind of strategy, but it's a long process, and it's trying to make sure that I don't get stuck in one thing that I think should be happening, because I think our ability to change quickly is why we end up being so successful towards the end, because I'm not afraid to pull the trigger if something's not working. It's like we can't, if we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting them to all of a sudden figure it out. At some point, we give them time to figure it out, but at some point we have to kind of change it, especially when they're so young, and they're fairly similar in talent for the most part. They all have different strengths, but I think again, their ability to adapt and be flexible is probably the most important part of it. But I know we all take a long time to do it. We always talk right before season, and everybody's like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I have no idea what the lineup's going to be. I have no idea who really knows what we're going to do right now. Yeah. But it's fun. I enjoy it a lot. That's probably one of my most favorite parts about it is trying to figure all that out, because
it's got it to me. And I don't coach NCAA anymore. I used to coach indoor, and we went through it with 6 and 7 people. Where we had like best friends on the team who are setters, and they're competing for the same spot. But NCAA beach volleyball to me right now, it seems like Survivor, like the show Survivor, where you figure out like how to form an alliance, and then there's all these emotions involved with like, well, I can either be better or I can be good with her, and hopefully you're doing both. And then you're wondering if coach is going to split up your best friend and now she's off the island, like it's crazy to think of the emotions that those players have to go through when you're making those decisions. And really the only thing that they can do, as far as I see it, is be adaptable,
right,
and play well. And then you have to follow the leader's lead, and that's it. And if you can do those things, if you can support your team, if you can do everything that you do right, and you're adaptable as hell, you're in a good spot for life on earth.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we always tell them it's like your reaction to it is one of the first things that we look at, because I think we in reality know, like, maybe beyond the 1 and the 2 and maybe even 3, there's going to be a lot of change, a lot at the bottom, even if we're just trying to match up from a physicality standpoint, or maybe we have one defender who's better at digging shots rather than a hard. I mean, there's so many things down there where it's like if we can match up a little bit better, we can. So their reaction to it, and just their ability to play with. We have had pairs together that couldn't stand each other outside of it. They were all Americans, and they played together for 4 years. I was like their marriage counselor, but they were so incredible together. They just were so hard-headed that they constantly were thinking about like who else could they play with, and we would try it. We would try it out, and then we would be like, it's not as good. This is why you have to be together.
That was that Swiss team from back in the early 2000s, two Swiss guys that did not get along, literally not a single word to each other the entire match. They no high fives, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think their father was coaching them, and they were brothers, and they hated each other. But they're in the Olympics.
I had a pair, and they're 2-time All-Americans, and they would peel out after all the games. They would just peel off from each other, and then I'd have to bring them back at some point. And it's like, I get it, but you guys are literally like 25-3, so just figure it out. Like, you guys will be all right. Yeah.
And I like kind of, later in my career, I'm kind of looking at that. Like, yes, I want to play with the great players, but then there's also still like, there's some players that you kind of just don't want to play with, even if they are good. You start looking at it, and we don't really make anything for beach volleyball. There's not like a ton of money, so it's not like if I put myself through hell, then at least I'll get a championship and get $1 million. That's the payoff. Like, the payoff is the championship, but it's like $7,500. So looking at the relationships, I'm starting to look at like, who am I going to enjoy myself with? Who am I going to like relax, be able to hang out with them, travel with them? And sometimes I'm cool hanging with somebody who doesn't talk at all, because like I'm a lot less talky nowadays. And sometimes it's like Kurt Topple was one of my favorite partners, and that guy did not stop talking, but it was always like kind of interesting and fun, and he's hyper intelligent. So even though he wouldn't be my typical, like, it's a little too talky for me, it was always interesting and funny, and he would make random friends wherever we went in the world. And so it was, he became one of my best friends that season we played together. And you always keep trying to find that emotional balance of, is it worth it to play with a better player, and how much better are you going to be?
Right.
If it's just, it makes life sucky. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes depending on your goals, it is, and you have to take that into account. What's my goal? Why do I play? Why am I competing? Why am I signing up for a tournament? And then take an assessment of who you want to play with and who you should play with.
Fun stuff.
You mentioned a little bit, and I do want to get into kind of physicality, but in terms of, you had one person who you said maybe digs shots better and maybe digs hard driven ball. Could you give me, and I'll ask you to search your brain for, it's imaginary, but I want you to think of somebody in your conference, like one team, and then just without mentioning them or your team, just say the strategy and why you would use it. Could you just pull one of your strategies for the players who are listening and are trying to, they hear about strategy, and as far as they go, it's serve the person who can't hit as well, and that's like as deep as they go. So I want to help people get more strategy. So what do you look for?
So we set up our serving strategy based off of what our defensive strengths are, and how we can. So we don't necessarily just serve the best or the worst hitter, because that's maybe our defender doesn't defend whatever it is that they're doing very well. That happens all the time. We do have a lot of different players where one is much better at digging shots versus hard driven, where we also have a kid that's much shootier and the other one just likes to swing at everything. We have some that move and some that are higher. So there's all these different things, right? So we will first talk to our players once we have film of who they want to serve because they think they can funnel this shot or this heart. So even if it's, you take UCLA for instance, because they're the last team we played. Very, very, very good team. Definitely not just a shooty team. A lot of them swing and take big swings a lot. I think our defenders were comfortable with that because they like it's their strength. Like they felt really good serving some of the bigger players and just kind of sitting there and getting ready to dig that ball because they knew that they could do it. So it wasn't necessary. It wasn't in a mind frame of like, I want to stay away from that because she's really strong. It was like, I want this and I want to serve her because I'm trying. This is my strength as a defender. And I know that I can dig this ball and convert off of it. So we really try to work. I think from a mindset perspective, it's good because they're coming into defense in a much more aggressive mindset with and like understanding what it is that they're trying to take. And even if it might be the player's best shot or best swing, it may be
defense.
It might be our strength defensively. So we try to do that. So even if we take a timeout, if we have a player that's coming out of the middle and maybe she's swinging, we go through, we practice multiple defenses based on scenarios, etc. So we always give them the options. It's like, hey, this is what she's doing. We're going to serve her here, and this is what she's going to do. We can either do this defense, or that defense. And we let them decide what they're going to do because they're confident in that decision with like, I know that if she's going to do that, I can run this defense and I'm going to dig that ball. So we give them those options based off of how we've trained them, and that their decision comes off of them knowing that this shot or swing, their best way to defend it is by running this particular defense, where maybe our 2 seed, their strength is very different from what our 4 seed is. So we have to give them that flexibility of not just if I were playing, I would run this because this is how I would do it. It's understanding they all have different defensive strengths. So, again, if this is this player's strength and we know she's going to do it, I defensively know that I can run this particular defense and I'm going to dig this ball more likely than not. And then that, takes her kind of her strength away. So we always try to take the strength away from the player more than hoping that somebody's going to make an error or hoping that somebody's going to miss hit, because I think obviously the higher levels you play, the higher teams you play, they're not going to make those errors. They're not going to do that for you. It's going to be a side out match and you have to find the defensive breaks where you get them. So we try to do that in a much more aggressive mindset, but we do try to match up sometimes with our 4 and 5 defenders because they're fairly similar from a skill perspective, where there are a lot of 5 seeds we play that are just very shooty. And we have a kid that just loves running around and can dig 5,000 shots no matter what. Like she's just like everywhere. It's like, do it. So we'll match her up because we know that that's her strength. Whereas our other defender, she's going to get a little lazy on the high line sometimes, but she can dig a hard driven ball so well. So we'll flip like that because
so many players like that. There's so many players that are fantastic shot diggers, but if you just blast them, you're fine, and vice versa. Like they will lip you if you unload, and then as soon as you hit a high line, they're just frozen. They didn't even move. And it's like,
and you have to.
Why would I swing here?
Right. Yeah, and it's the same thing when we have. When you're on the offensive side of it, it's are you going to play into that defender's strength? Are you going to kind of get into a little match there, because we have this like everything wants to swing and I'm like, hey, I get it, but she's digging every ball. So it's just not the thing to do right now. I think there's one team we play who their defender, and she's frustrating. She is a run around, like she's everywhere. It's like, girl, what am I going to do with you? I have no idea.
Is she jukey or is she just low, very read and very quick?
She holds. She's not jukey, but we don't see her. Like she moves really late and she does it very smoothly. But in the same breath, we know that if we don't swing first against her, she's just going to do that the whole game. And then she'll give up, the couple of hard hard angle swings that you do because it's not affecting the match enough.
Right.
So that's the thing. It's like, okay, if you have a defender like that, you have to establish your hard swing, or they're just going to constantly be on the move. And same thing if you've got a defender who likes to dig, the hard driven attack. It's like, if you're not establishing those shots, she's just going to sit there and she's going to give those up because it's not going to affect the match enough. I actually really like playing jukey players because I feel like they give up a lot.
What do you think they give up the most? Do you think they give up hard driven the most, or
yeah,
just
and
they
honestly,
move too early, so it actually makes them
too
easy
early,
to see?
and a lot of it is probably more, not that it's not an effective defense. I think it's probably those players just don't run it effectively from a timing perspective, especially at the college level.
You just give it away. Your
Yeah,
position just
it's like you're
tiny bit
juking.
too early.
Yeah, we played one kid who juked like 5 times, and I was like, "You're making me tired just watching you. I don't even know what you're doing." It's like, what are you digging? So
But over time, that's distracting. I mean, so there's bad about that. But over time, it's like, if you never think they're going to sit still, then you just decide, screw it, because they're too hard to keep track of. So I'm not going to try to shoot anymore. I'm just going to hit. And maybe that would help lead them into your blocker.
Mm-hmm.
But only if you're good at juking and actually making plays. And like, because the people who move around and then they finally flash in one place, but it's too early, then it becomes a joke for a hitter with vision.
Right. Yeah.
I think that early move, it's so many people don't know that they're moving early and completely just making it easy on the attacker.
Yeah, we like playing those players. So yeah, there's different, and the fun thing about college, and especially each individual pair we play, even if it's a different seed, they all obviously have their own little, strengths, weaknesses, but from a team perspective, they all fairly similarly, systematically do fairly similar things.
Okay.
We train team system a lot in that way, in preparing. That way, if there is a change at a seed with maybe a player we hadn't scouted or whatever, we know for the most part, from a system standpoint, that they're going to fall under the same umbrella.
Okay, and then, so certain swings or certain defenses work in certain situations over time.
Because every coach has a particular way that they train and a particular style that they like. And like I said, we know the teams that like to juke. We know the teams that like to double juke. We know the teams that like to do straight up. They're never going to switch their defense ever. We know the ones that like to peel. I mean, that's just like, again, so from a system standpoint, I think we can prep our teams. We prep our teams in that manner. And then once we scout, we can focus on each individual pair, what might work for us versus not. But I think as long as I've been in it now, so I'm going into my 10th year, all of these coaches, we've all been the same, where I'm like, yep, we're playing them. This is what they're going to do, like without even watching film, because we just know already, like that's what they do. So that's all good. And that's a very long-winded, but I think from a defensive standpoint, I think just trying to rely, we really don't try to rely on somebody making errors. I think if there's somebody who doesn't pass well, then yeah, we'll put pressure, but then all of a sudden they become an amazing passer when they're playing you. And then you're like, what am I supposed to be doing? So we sometimes just like I said, like to serve the stronger thing if we know that they're very predictable in what they're going to do. I think that helps as well. Like if they only do 2 things offensively, I think our kids feel very comfortable with knowing like, hey, I just have to prioritize this and she's going to prioritize that. I think the players that just, they have no pattern really. You can sit there and watch film of them all day and they're just not going to do the same thing. And they run, multiple sets and they do multiple things off of multiple sets. Those kids are hard. It's like, no, let's stay away from her because.
Okay. So you go to the people that have the fairly predictable offense, like the hard cross and high line people.
Right.
It's
that's easy.
There are those players that those are their only 2 shots, and all right,
and
that's all we got to worry about.
Yeah.
We can peel and we can sit in the cross.
Right. Yeah. Let's make it
Are
easy.
there any serve locations that you've seen over your career that if we serve this, 90% of players hit this?
Ooh, That's hard.
Trying to give the listeners just like one
Yeah,
thing that they can do that they can predict for most of the teams. This will
I
happen.
think each team, like I said, I think each team has a passing predictability based on if, okay, hey, we're going to serve them all in the seam, because if we serve them in the seam, I'll take for instance, so there was one team we played, we knew if we served them in the seam, they were going to run behind and they were going to hit a high line. That's what they did. So we tried to, yeah, very simple, right? It's just not a very good team as well. They were in the top 10, but it just like we knew we could execute that serve, and then again, if they were going to go behind and hit that high line, we, from an option, our defender was either going to wait and then run down the line, or we were going to peel line. So those were what we were going to do.
So to defend the high line, do you have a preference to defend the high line, peel, or run the very late 4?
Depending on if our blocker is a very good peeler on that ball, or again, like, we talk to our defenders first. It's like, are you comfortable running that down? Do you want her digging that ball? So which one do we want to do? So we kind of give them those options of like, hey, this is what we're going to serve. This is what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So what defense is the best for us in terms of that? Because there are some peelers that we have, like I said, our 2 seed that I know they can peel all day and funnel that ball. And some other blockers, I'm like, no, I think you should stay up there and stay away from that. Just let your defender do their job. So I think it changes based off of, again, a situational. But I think when you can find those patterns with a particular pair or partner or team, where it's, again, like we can see it because we have so much film and we can cut it up and we can see all these patterns, where from a team perspective, we're like, oh, yeah, let's serve that because they all do the same thing.
Okay.
I think short serves, we've really tried to do more of this year because I think it jams people up a lot, and they can, again,
I love short serves.
Yeah, it's very, very predictable, where if they're probably only going to do this one particular thing based off, even if they are passing it, they're probably going to do that. So it's how can you isolate that to make that player very predictable? Instead of them giving them you might be serving them deep in that corner, but that might be their best, they're practiced that all the time. They know how to move off of that corner.
And they get more variable shots.
Yeah, more variance, and it makes it harder to read. So we always try to find the serving spot that limits the predictability, because that helps us defensively. Do you find it all the time? Sometimes, but I think we've gotten fairly good at it. And again, a lot of it comes off of your ability to execute the serve. We can talk about serving short all day, but if our players can't execute it, then it's worthless.
Right. Yeah, you serve short and they always high line and cut. And we have terrible chasers and overhand diggers.
Yeah, that's like great. So it has to make sense for what your strengths are. And then if you're going to funnel that and it's going to be predictable, it's because it's coming. We're trying to dictate more of what we're trying to get on the other side. Can we do it all the time? No, but if we can, again, like 30-40% of the time, get the ball we're trying to get, then we're in a really good position from a transition conversion standpoint to be able to convert more and win that little battle there. So that's what we kind of try to focus on.
Hey, all things being equal with 2 players, you talked about you had your double defender team that did magic. Would you put is there a rule that you use for who's going to be the net protector peeler? Because our audience has a lot of BAAA players, and I am on a mission to help them understand that they don't need to block, so that they should be peeling more. But then a lot of them, in the beginning, they get confused over who should be up, when should be up. And is there a certain a physical attribute that you say, that's why this person should be the peeler? Should the more agile person be protecting the net and peeling because they get stopped and balance easier? Or should the more agile person be able to use their agility from the ground, and like they're stable? Do you have any rules or insights on that? Or for all things being equal, how do we decide who's going to be the net protector peeler?
Yeah. Tough. Everything is always, because it changes, so like if I take my 2 seed, primarily Annette was we just because she was a better peeler. She was more comfortable and when deciding when to peel versus not, and she felt like Carol was better at running down high lines.
What made her a better peeler? Was it her overhand digging ability? Was her ability
Yeah,
to get
definitely
stopped?
overhead peeling for sure.
Okay.
Like
Okay. So
just
slaps,
I
pokies,
mean,
tomahawks.
yeah, everywhere. Like just so good. Could dig the balls overhead. Just again like agile. Her timing of it was really good. And she's small, and even if people knew that she was going to do that, she was still going to dig and funnel the ball.
Cool.
But then there were some teams we played where maybe they really challenged her on the peel and it just wasn't working. And then we would switch sometimes and have Carol peel because she was better at digging that particular player or that particular team.
Okay.
So it's gone both ways. We always try to morph into what's happening with the game. But again, we've prepared them both ways because it depends on who we're playing and how that player is handling, how we're handling what that player is able to do. Because again, nothing is ever the same. And there will be some instances where maybe they were split blocking and Annette was just not playing defense very well behind Carol on the block. So we would just be like, hey, you're going to serve, but you got to run up this time because we're at 13-13 in the third set and we need to play into your strength. So I think it always changes.
Sometimes it could be a great defender and like somebody has a weird arm swing or the way their wrist hits the ball.
And
it's like you're a great defender and they don't match your skill set or your eyes. And you're like, I don't know why, but I can't dig this person.
Yeah. And I think at that point you have to change what you're doing. And I'm not saying everybody can block and everybody can play defense, but I think that if you're playing, like you said, a very kind of equal skill set, you have to try it at some point because what's the worst that's going to happen? Because you might be defending that person better. You might be lining up on the block better. You might do better on the peel than your partner normally does. So,
what's that point for you? How long do you wait? You come in, you've already said you come in with a defensive strategy. We haven't even talked about offensive strategy yet, but at what point in the game do you tell them? Because I think players give up and they say, you just got to feel the game. And I'm like, no, that's like, a pro who's been playing for 30 years or since he was born saying, giving some passing advice that you're like, that's not actually what happens. That's just what you think happens. And you're bad at describing it. So do you allow them to feel the game or do you say, hey, this is when we reassess?
Yeah.
Or is there a percentage that happens? How do you do that?
So our rule of thumb is always 3. If the same ball is happening 3 times, we at least have to change our defense. It may not necessarily be changing who is blocking, who's defending, but we need to change our defense. It's not working. Now we
in a row?
Yes, in a row. Like the
3
same
kills
thing
or 3 of the same swing?
3 of the same swing. If 3 of the same, if it's happening 3 times in a row, like say we've peeled 3 times and that person's hit the peeler 3 times or scored versus a peel, even in a different direction 3 times, then we should be changing our defense. We can go back to it, but we need to show something else instead of losing the same thing.
So wait, Coach Hernandez, you don't just change your strategy after 1 kill from the other team?
No.
Bonkers.
Yeah, I know. So there's 2 different things. One, we focus on our side out. And so we know that if we're siding out well, we need to focus on that first. And then eventually we will get the defensive break because we know that the teams we're playing are going to side out. It is unrealistic for us to assume that we're going to defend every single ball. It's not real. If we focus on trying to defend every single ball, then we lose focus on our side out, and then the game gets away from us super fast.
Interesting. I think that's a soundbite right there.
Yeah. So if we're going back and forth, in the beginning of a match and it's just ping pong, we want our players to be comfortable in that state with just like, we're just playing the game right now. Mm-hmm. And then eventually we'll get the ball we need in transition and then we'll score that point and we'll get a little bit ahead. So we try to find those little breaks. But but it's also with the understanding we have to be patient with our defense to where if this is the defense we've decided to run and it's not working, we'll keep changing it until we find the thing that is helping us funnel it better. And that takes a great deal of patience. Instead of just like deciding that you're going to change serves all of a sudden, or you're going to serve the different person. I think if you're not going through all of your scenarios with that particular person, you could change everything before you find that break. In the fact that, okay, now I found the serve that's weak for her. I found the ball I can funnel. So
do you change your defense first, or do you change the serve location first?
Serve location.
Okay, so your first checkpoint is like, all right, we know that we think she's going to do this, so I'm going to serve here because I think that
Right.
will be her predictable shot. And
Right.
then if we're not digging her, then we're like, all right, we're going to stay on the same player, but we're going to see if she becomes predictable when we serve her in X spot.
Right.
So you don't just like change your play
No.
call randomly. You don't
Right.
just say, that's not working, let's serve the other person with a no plan in mind other than serve the other
Everything
person.
has to be planned. Yeah. So like I said, when we take timeouts, it's like, hey, this is what she's doing. Here are 3 defensive options that we haven't done that we can do. And then again, they decide what works off of them. If nothing is working, then we'll switch, serving the other person. Seam is always a good starting point if nothing's really working, because seam jams up a lot of people, or they start setting out a system. And
I love short seam, short sideline.
Seam,
I think you can always go there.
Seam is always, it's always our like default of like, okay, let's just serve there because we can't find anything that's working. But we do focus on our side out tremendously, because I think you can get wrapped up in defense so much and feel like you have to win every point there, but that's not what's winning you the game. You will get your breaks.
It's emotionally taxing to do that.
Yeah, it is.
I get so mad every time the other team scores a point. I see so many players do that. They're just like, God, we lost another one. Hey, if you wipe the floor with them, it's going to be a 21-17 game. That means that they'll have earned 17 points. If you get pissed off for every single one of them, like you're getting it fired up 17 times, calling yourself a failure, when if you look at the scoreboard after their 17 kills, you crushed them. Like 21-17 is a good score,
Right. Yeah. So yeah, we and the same thing, like if we're playing a player and I'm like, hey, this is her best shot, like you have to give it to her. Like you can't defend everything. You've got to have a priority. Your blocker has a priority. And if you're able to take those priorities and they're still, you're funneling at least a few percentages, like I said, like somewhere between 30% on that priority, and that player is still comfortably doing their best thing, you're still in a better position to win the match. And you have to give them that other stuff. Like it's, again, I think we get into this idea that we have to shut somebody down. And there are players that you can shut down. I'm not saying there's not. But again, when we play the higher level teams, you just have to be okay with the fact that they're good and they're going to figure out how to score. And again, it's being comfortable in that space and being patient till when you find the thing that's actually working for you, then the game's going to start shifting, and then you'll win those big points when they matter. Instead of getting so flustered at the beginning of the game, it's like
I think that's the difference between. I'll bring it back to me, which is stupid, but like me in like my early 20s and me now, like I'm fine now with not pulling away 14-14, 15-15, 16-16. Like let's go. And and when I was in my early 20s and maybe younger and probably in my early 30s, it would be at that point and I'll be like, why haven't we pulled away yet? Why haven't we pulled away? It's like, I think Ricardo Santos, he goes, there are a lot of volleyball points left.
Yeah. There's a lot. Yeah. You have to be so comfortable in that space. And we are, and I mean, I say that, and that's how we coach them. And we don't take a timeout and get flustered because they're not digging this ball. It's
not relaxing, but it's being comfortable, right?
You're right. It's right. It's not relaxing, but we always tell them, he was like, just wait for the break. Just wait for the break. Like, just wait for the break. Just be patient and wait for the break. You'll get it. And I think they constantly have that mentality now because we're reinforcing that. So that creates, not that they don't get impatient, they do. But we reinforce with the same thing that we're trying to get them to think of,
right?
Instead of like telling them to be patient and then being like, why didn't you dig that high line ball? She's doing the same thing every time. It's like, yeah, okay, well.
Yeah, in many ways, it's like chess. Everybody has the same similar openings. Everybody knows the first like 5 or 6 moves. Mid game gets like kind of into the weeds, and then end game is where it actually happens.
Yeah.
Where you've discovered all of their moves and you've kind of set yourself up enough to now is the kill. But there's a pace, there's a stage to the game, and it's not I need to win this match now. It's not 1-1. I need to win this match now.
Right.
There's beginning game, probably everybody's equal. I mean, at if levels are similar, everybody's equal, and then mid game is when you really figure it out, and then the end game starts when you've put them into a position X amount of times, and now you're ready to capitalize on that.
Correct. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Yeah, that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff.
The good stuff.
Yeah, it's the good stuff.
Oh, so many people never get to that, but it's
so
just
fun
when they do.
Okay. And then when the game starts, it's like 3-3, and we haven't defended the girl. The kids look at me and I'm like, the game just started. Like, just give it a while. Like, she's a good
It's not
player.
working.
Yeah, she's a good player. Like, why do we want to take a timeout right now? It's only 4. It's on the first side switch. Like, just chill out. Let the game come to you. It's like, fine. So you'll be all right. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Hey, I know you've got family. You've got a ton of responsibilities. I, like so many of our guests, I feel like in no way have we even scratched the surface. But at the same time, I feel like this episode was, in terms of how I look at another player, how I look at my team, how I understand the flow of a game. This had to be probably our most influential in terms of playing for players. Definitely best episode we've had in that. Incredible to talk with you, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Yeah, for sure. It's been awesome.
Really dive in, because we didn't even talk about like offensive selection or any of that.
So much fun stuff.
I know there should be like, I think the hour, it's probably easy to listen to, and to choose an episode that's like an hour and 20 minutes. But really there's hundreds of hours that you could talk about and dive into and understand. And I think young coaches as well, they try to take all of their knowledge and try to put it into somebody immediately, like in one practice. And it's like, well, we got to go step by step. Yeah. So I think if you'd like to come back on, that's what we'll do with each other. We'll just take it step by step and peel each little bit of your knowledge.
We'll eventually get to our offense eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, this has been fun. It's been great. Hopefully it helped. But yeah, I think the thing is like everything is, there's no like one thing or one particular answer. I think everything is, like I said, so situational and so different. I think all of the players are different, but we definitely try to operate in like, what is this person's strength and how can I use that to our advantage, rather than trying to focus on the other team so much. Because then, like you said, it's a chess match, but it's like, what side of the chess match are you on? Are you the one being the aggressor, or are you trying to constantly react? And we don't want to constantly react. We want to be the aggressor in how we're moving. Yeah.
Or you could be like a spider that lays the trap. You feel like you're a victim. Oh, look at me. Nah, snaps you.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, is there any last kind of parting words or advice that you would have for either players who are interested in coming to your university or in college in general, players anywhere, or club and future collegiate coaches? Do you have any advice for any of those sets of people in particular, or all of them?
That's a lot. That's a lot of different philosophy. Yeah.
Let's start with players who are coming up. Like what's
who are coming up. I think, like I said, I think the talent level is amazing. I think the best thing you could probably tell young players, and just because we hear stuff when we're recruiting, And because we've talked about it from a situational standpoint, you've got to learn both sides of it. You've got to learn how to block, and you've got to learn how to defend, even if I'm not 6'4", 6'2", you could still, like I said, you could still be 5'7" and still be really good, even if you just know how to move and set up your defense without ever blocking. So I think not pigeonholing into this is what I'm going to do when I think I'm going to get to college, or doing the same thing with every single partner you play with, and always playing with the same partner. I think that's where people get tripped up. Like we have almost Boba. I think one of the things we found when juniors come, and I know we all have the same problems, they play all these juniors events and they always have the same partner because they get to pick their partner. And I think that they struggle when they get into a college environment because they don't get to pick their partner. They have to work in a team environment, and their first choice is not always the best choice for the entire lineup. And I think that's hard for a lot of them. They really struggle.
I think parents and juniors need to hear that.
Yeah.
Because when they're saying well, my girl's not playing with this, my girl's not playing with this. Here's the third place for most winningest coach in NCAA history, right? She's saying, I need to see your player play with multiple people. Yeah. To see how she reacts and I'll have confidence that she'll come into the college environment well, instead of, no, she needs to be with her. And that's the only way they'll win and get deeper into the tournament. Listen, film is film, no matter how far you've gotten in the tournament. Film is film, and seeing somebody compete with multiple, that's something parents and probably club coaches and directors need to hear, that I don't think is discussed.
Think about, because like I said, I think you get really comfortable playing with the same person all the time, that when you come in this environment, like I said, it's your perception changes and you react constantly to who you're put with, instead of just learning how to play with different people. So I think a lot of juniors do that too much, where I've seen kids for 4 years straight have the same juniors partner. It's they're winning all these tournaments. It's great, but you're not going to college with her. The likelihood of that, you're not going with her. So kind of setting yourself up for failure because you don't know how to operate with anybody else besides her. And it's not that you don't know how, it's just you haven't had to. It hasn't been a challenge for you to learn different personalities, to play a different role, because you don't have the best blocker or you don't have the same defender, whatever it is. So I think learning that in the juniors and doing that more is important, because it sets them up better for college. A lot of freshmen struggle when they first come because of the team environment, and they're not prepared to operate within that.
With multiple people and
because they want to play with
personalities. People would get stressed out in different ways, and you have to know that somebody's RBF, is somebody else's smile. When somebody experience discomfort or resting state in different ways, and people, they don't take into account the visuals that they pick up. And that just because somebody's got a stoic face doesn't mean they're mad. Yeah. Just because somebody's clapping and supporting doesn't mean she's feeling confident at that time. And you have to understand how to be, I think the moral of the story is to be versatile.
Yeah. So that would be my advice for them. Coaches, I think just like you said, I am constantly listening to podcasts or something, or learning, trying to constantly watch different. I watch your little YouTube videos all the time, because maybe there's something I can pick up on how I can construct something a little bit different or say something a little bit different. I think trying to learn as much as you can, different styles, different people, different ways. I know that I can pull things from different places to make different decisions, and it helps me feel very confident in what I'm doing or what decisions I make, because I've continued to kind of do my due diligence with finding different ways to do stuff, or different ways to see something, or
just to say it, so that it rings a little better for one athlete.
Yeah. I have so many international players, and some of them are I have no idea what you're talking about. So they're I just don't understand the word that you're saying. So I have to find some other way to say it, even if it's a nonverbal, or I have to get better at drawing. I had to draw everything out for her because she just like the language barrier. So trying to find different ways to say something because everybody responds differently. And it's not changing your personality. It's just changing the cue word that makes sense for them because it can be everything. And then what was the other group?
For the people who are playing.
People that are playing.
Just playing and love to have fun, but they definitely want control and want to be better.
Yeah. It's the same thing I said with the juniors. I think you've got to absorb and you've got to try to learn. You've got to be good being really bad at some point. Like you're not learning unless you're kind of going through that sticky stuff first. I think sometimes we go to practice and we want to feel really good about what we did and we pat ourselves in the back because we look super awesome at practice. That's never a good practice for us. Like for me, we didn't get anything done. So when we're really good at something, we're constantly adding another layer to it of challenge, whether it's focusing more on precision, on, a percentage of, like you said, 6 out of 10, we focus on that a lot. And then if we're hitting that marker, then what's the new marker that we can hit that's going to even more challenge? So there has to be constantly a new layer of challenge when something is hit or gets a little too comfortable and easy, because then it's the same thing. You'll be able to adapt more once you start playing and things don't go particularly with your way. So,
and I think focus, right? Like long-term focus,
right?
Yeah.
I think you can get into
I'm sucky at cut shots. At cut shots. Well, how many weeks have you spent hitting nothing but cut shots?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, people would do what they're comfortable with and like, well, I'm not good at that. Well, stop saying I'm not good at that. Stop complaining about X situation. You have to actively at some point do something about it. And even if it means committing one weekend to not focusing on winning, but focusing on, I'm going to get 100 cut shot kills this tournament.
Yeah, there's definitely a phase like we in the fall and probably the beginning of January for us, that's what we're focused. It's not just on the winning and looking really good and everything flowing. It's like we've got to go through all this messy and rough stuff. Same from a partnership standpoint, so that we can get to the good stuff. And then we get to that portion of where we are constantly competing. Then we focusing on managing our weaknesses because we can't spend hours and hours and hours trying to perfect one little technical imperfection. It's not the time. But we can still figure out how to morph our game to be able to not be a problem for us. So I think there's different, like I said, there's different portions of your year or your season where you've got to be okay with that challenge and learning process and dedicating time to what you're not good at. And then also understanding there's a point where you still need to focus on what you are good at and your strengths. And it's a fine line. But I think sometimes we just want to feel really good when we practice, and it's not, for me, it's not real. Like it's not real. Yeah.
I think we need those days. And more often I've been choking to like, hey, let's do like one of those kind of pyramid days where instead of competing, we're going to be practicing today until we get 100 perfect practices. We're not going to go on percentage on anything, and just that accomplishment, being able to walk home at least one day and say, I did great today.
Yeah.
That's or I got it done instead of environment. I think the emotional stores need to be recouped sometimes in those very successful days.
Yeah.
And people are always trying to find what's wrong.
No.
Take one day where you know that it's right and you just, hey, look at me. I got 100 perfect passes today.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many were bad.
Yeah. And then the other thing on the flip side, there's sometimes where things come out really imperfect, but you still are successful, and you've got to be good with that too. Like my little 2C play, she's like, she has such high expectations of herself. And like, if something trickles off the net, she's like, oh, and I'm like, it's a point. Nobody cares. You still scored the point.
You're good enough to screw up and win.
Yeah, the odds of that happening again are so low, but like just give it to yourself. You don't have to like over analyze every single thing that wasn't executed perfectly, because again, it's not real. It's going to happen. It gets a little crazy sometimes. So it's like, I think sometimes we just focus on everything that's just not working, and it's like, okay, well, what was the good in that? And then how can I make it a little bit better? But like, let's focus on the part of that was actually good.
Yeah.
And then like, what's the other thing that we can do in that scenario instead of just like, oh, I suck, because that's like a horrible response to have. And it's a response that a lot of people have because they just want to execute everything all the time. And just like everything else, it's just that patience to work through it. Can you actually do that? It's easy to say it. We talk about it all the time. And then the minute our players start doing something, we get the flailing and, all that other stuff. And it's like, again, what's that response that you have? Because that's how you're responding to that is your ability to get better, regardless of what that outcome was on the other side.
Yeah.
That will come if you're actually working through that and not giving yourself a hard time about it. Like, just, again, it's the sweet spot. It's like, that's the fun stuff of finding the stuff that you need to kind of keep tweaking and be like, oh, okay, well, that's another part of my game that I can keep getting better at, and see it as a good thing, not as such a negative thing, because it's not. It's just don't, again, our perspective, it's not a negative thing. It's just new information. It's new information, and how do I use this information?
I like that.
Yeah.
I really like that. Well, Kristina, Coach Hernandez, thank you so much.
Yeah,
great talk.
I can sit here and talk to you forever.
Great talk. Yeah, there was no slowdown. There was like, I ditched my whole sheet of questions so that I told you how it would go. I was like, yeah, we got questions, but we might not answer it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for everybody who's listening. We've got Coach Hernandez's links and the links to Stetson University Volleyball down in the show notes. So if you want to click and check out and support her team, definitely go for it. And if you ever want to come to any of our coaching clinics or take our online coaching certification, you are more than welcome to come on over to betteratbeach.com and follow through all the clicks and answer all the questions. We'd love to have you on board. But Kristina, like I said, I would love to have another conversation and dive even deeper. This time we'll like focus on maybe offense or something like that, and lifting and things. So,
yeah.
But this was fantastic. And I think everybody who's going to listen to this is going to absolutely love it.
Well, great. I had a great time, and yeah, I would love to be back on. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for
being here. Yeah. Everybody have a great day.
Congrats on all your success. Keep going.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.